Hey everybody, hope week 10 is treating you guys pretty well. For the regulating media assignment, I was assigned a topic of equal opportunity. So upon seeing my topic, to be honest with you guys, I was a little confused. I had to really sit there and think like, what did Professor Cooke want me to address in terms of equal opportunity? Was this to be about, job markets or jobs in media, or maybe was it something different? So the more I kind of thought about it and the more I went through my past notes and looked at maybe some past lessons too a little bit, I really thought about it as the whole idea of providing opportunity for people to own their own intellectual property, as well as to allow small voices to be heard in the greater scheme of media. So throughout history, we've seen a lot of different things. Throughout U.S. history, anyway, we've seen a lot of different regulators and similar governmental action into promoting the idea of equal opportunity. So what does like my idea of equal opportunity even address? Like I feel like it's such a multifaceted hurdle, and the whole idea to me is that there's an interest in bringing up the smaller voice as well as to encourage competition. True competition is not necessarily fully corporate. You don't want only large companies to be the whole power, the whole media voice. You also want smaller voices to have an opportunity to provide a very mixed media. So, from the early FRC regulation of radio channels to current means of internet and TV and all sorts of other media platforms, we can find a timeline of regulation from the U.S. government that holds, a thin line. Obviously it's gotten more complicated over time, but there's a thin line that stays pretty consistent as to why they want to implement these kind of these factors of equal opportunity and these regulars of equal opportunity for the smaller voice. So the Radio Act of 1927 and the establishment of the FRC are something that I've noticed we became very familiar with throughout the different communications and media classes. Because radio became such a huge consumer force at the beginning of the 1900s, the U.S. government had to enact the act as well as establish the FRC, which later became the FCC. So this act and the FRC itself were built upon three main factors. Pretty much they wanted to, really drive home the idea that the airwaves themselves were public property. We didn't want them to be owned by a single entity. You can kind of, I'm skipping ahead of myself, but you kind of think of it like the internet, where you don't want a single person owning it, a single entity owning it. You want it to be fair game, small and large outlets alike to have equal opportunity. There's also regulation of who can use the airspace where and when, because especially back at this time period, there's only a few major hub cities of radio, so smaller towns and stuff weren't getting fair share of airtime. So there needed to be new regulations for that, especially in like rural areas. Overall, it gave a lot of representation as well to the American people in general of all different kinds. These regulations are really a way to avoid corporate monopolization and allow for local news and smaller media to represent themselves, as well as the independent media journalists. So this whole thing was pretty much foundational in understanding equal opportunity in media. As media has gone, like I said earlier, from print to radio all the way up to the web nowadays, um, there's consistencies in the government having interest in less monopolization and more opportunity for smaller voices to have their own ideals, as well as to, as I'm going to cover in the next slide, protect their ideals. Copyright is something that doesn't only benefit large corporations and monopolies, but also the smaller creators as well. It really gives the creator equal opportunity as they own intellectual property because we want to avoid infringement. Um, Copyright itself was actually introduced to promote the progress of science and the arts with respect to individual intellectual property. So we oftentimes think of copyright as for music or movies and big name things, but really it was put in place for individuals' intellectual property. It was really extended in 1998 with the Copyright Extension Act, where now creators' work could be copyrighted for life plus 70 years post death, or 120 years from citation with 95 years from publishing. Fair use is for the purpose of criticism, comment, and providing equal opportunity to creators to be able to use other media and large media, even if they're not a multi-million-dollar corporation, but still to be able to utilize it. Um, Similarly, like the Audio Home Recording Act of 1992, it was kind of in place for what I just said. Like it saved the private folk from making mixtapes and allowed them to have an opportunity to use multi-use media and be creative with it. Similarly was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, which dealt with new media rules. Just overall, we can see a whole growth in media regulation from all the way back in the FRC days in the 20s, all the way throughout the 90s, with new regulations like Digital Millennium Copyright and FCC licenses not being revoked, but with new 8-year terms and stuff like that. They really just wanted mixed media in general. They wanted small entities to be able to protect themselves as well as to have fair use laws and overall just create a mixed media environment, which allows for a lot more opportunity. So to pretty much sum up my ideas of this whole presentation and my write-up, the whole idea of equal opportunity to me is, being there for the creator, for the individual, the little guy. Let's avoid copyright. Sorry, let's avoid monopolization in corporate America, and instead allow for media to be a lot more colorful and have a lot more say from smaller voices and all that. Um, in the future, I feel we can expect, as media gets more and more complicated and, there's international hurdles and stuff like that, we can still see similar things from dating back all the way to the FRC and Radio Act days, like we've seen throughout the 90s, in regulation and other regulators that the government implements to allow the small creators to still have their voice to be heard and to allow, just an overall more and more diverse media space in America. I think that the government wants people to be more informed, and they want people to have, their say, because it's a whole, just like freedom of speech is such a big thing in America, and I feel as though that having equal opportunity in media is just such a important thing to the whole ideals of the U.S. in government and media. So it makes sense that a similar vein has followed through for so many decades, and I think it can only go on for a lot longer.